Yep. She said hold all conversations.
I know.
Testing in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Presentations, Code Enforcement, Director Lauer. Good evening.
It's working. Good evening, everybody.
Yes. Sorry, Heather.
Presentation for tonight's work session is about code enforcement operations, how code enforcement works in the town of Zebulon, and what are some next steps as the town continues to grow. The contents of the presentation, we'll give a general overview. We'll talk about how the operations work, some examples of how our work in the field has improved conditions on the ground, and then the next steps, some things that we can look forward to in the future, and some things we can do to continue to enhance our level of service. So about code enforcement. Code enforcement exists in Zebulon and in many communities that have the planning program structure we have as effectively the implementation or I guess more accurately, the quality assurance component of the planning program. And so when we talk about code enforcement in Zebulon's context, we need to think about it in how it's positioned within the department. So our department has 4 verticals, but in this case, one is like a special advisory vertical to the board on infrastructure, but then there's these 3 verticals that work together, right? There's long-range planning. That is our strategy vertical, right? So it's comprehensive planning, transportation planning, so on and so forth. Current planning is the implementation vertical. So that's the development ordinance, that's zoning administration, design review. How do we take the strategy and put it in a position where then we can guide developers and implement our strategy? Code enforcement is the quality assurance component of all of this. So it's zoning enforcement, building enforcement, general code enforcement. How do we ensure that what we're implementing continues to align with the current planning vertical, and then also with our long-range planning strategies? Now, code enforcement is a big term. It really, when we think about code enforcement, I want everybody to think about it in terms of 3 buckets here. So there's a zoning enforcement, building enforcement, and general code enforcement. And together, all 3 of these touch many different departments. So where the planning department is the primary agency is the zoning enforcement. So these are items in which are managed by the UDO. So this can include unauthorized land uses, appearance that's not related to health and safety issues, setbacks, finals, working with builders, so on and so forth. And there's 2 primary agencies. Planning is the main one in this bucket. And then the fire marshal is also involved, and we work closely with him. There's a building enforcement, which is primarily construction standards. So it's the International Building Code. Working without a permit falls under this enforcement category. And this is the category in which the town of Zebulon right now does the least with. So we certainly manage this process, but we don't always have final decision authority in how these cases shake out. The Wake County Building Inspector, who we outsource much of this to, is the primary agency, and then the fire marshal as well is involved in this. The third bucket is the most general, because the general code covers many different things, right? But the main thing that it covers in this context is really health, safety, and general welfare. Tall grass, minimum housing, noise, rights-of-way violations, things like that. Depending on what the violation is, depends on what agency is responsible for enforcing it. It could be the planning department in some cases, for tall grass, for example. It could be police, the fire marshal, or even things that we outsource to the Wake County Building Inspector. So moving these 3 items, or enhancing these 3 items over time is a responsibility of the planning department. But there are many things within these 3 kind of buckets of enforcement that fall under different departments, but we all work together under kind of the guidance or the technical advisory support that we provide to enhance these services over time. So with that as background, let's talk a little bit about how we operate the code enforcement program. I'm going to start with building enforcement because it's a little simpler to talk about and it's a somewhat separate process. The county inspectors handle most of the day-to-day work in the building enforcement process. What do we do? Well, we're the managers of that. So we host the pre-construction meetings. We do the beginning and the end of all of the vertical construction processes. So we do the setback inspection and the final inspections. We write the COs for any building that's built in Zebulon. We determine the conditions necessary for temporary certificates of occupancy. So let's say that there's a commercial building that it effectively meets the International Building Code, but it doesn't meet certain zoning issues, or there's strange kind of one-off rights-of-way issues that aren't resolved. We can issue temporary certificates of occupancy to open the business, and we have the authority to condition those. We also become involved if there's building without a permit, or VIO, or a violation. We also have the authority to expire permits as allowed by state law. And just so for y'all's knowledge, that's 6 months after you issue a permit. If no work has begun, it's eligible to be expired. And if you have started work and then all of a sudden you stop, a year later, we can expire that permit as well. Our two code enforcement officers, Ted and Tyler, they're out in the field every single day. I wanted to talk a little bit about what they do day to day, and then we'll kind of expand upon what happens when they see a violation out in the field. Our officers have three primary duties. They do the zoning, setbacks, and finals. They monitor the community for violations, and they're responsive to call-ins and complaints. They also backfill the planning tech. Both of them are cross-trained on our permit software, and so on and so forth. Their typical workday, they start earlier than the rest of the department because builders tend to call in their setbacks and finals early in the morning, either to get construction started or to close a house. So early in the morning, they're doing their zoning inspections, their setbacks and finals. Mid-morning, they typically do their community monitoring. Each of them takes a section of town that they patrol. In the afternoon is paperworks. It's when usually we'll respond to call-ins during the day, and commercial finals tend to happen in the afternoon. Every violation that's issued has a series of paperwork that goes with it, and it's kind of a hidden part of the job. But that documentation is really important because due process is really important in this situation. How do we track violations? Well, we do have a list of issued violations, and I get this list every Monday morning, and we review it in terms of what's been issued, are there priorities, and then we'll also talk about things they've seen in the field and what may need additional follow-up. They keep basically two sets of notes when they're out in the field. One is just simply field notes that they keep in iPads that have been issued. But the other is that some cases before a violation gets issued, we'll set up a case in the InterGov inspection module, and we'll enter notes in that case. And sometimes they turn into real violations, and sometimes if it gets corrected before a violation is issued, the violation goes away. But the most important part of their job, and this is one of the key things that in their performance reviews that they're graded on, is a community engagement. And the big question in code enforcement is, can we solve the problem without a violation? And most things get resolved simply by just talking to people. Talking to people often creates compliance. There's a variety of examples. One is that we have relationships with each of the rental companies, or most of the rental companies, the big ones that rent single-family homes out in the newer neighborhoods. And usually when there's violations, Ted or Tyler will send an email, and it tends to get cleaned up without having to issue a formal violation. Not always, but the hit rate is much higher than not. Some other examples, if you have an activity-based issue, so let's say someone has set up a flower stand, or we've had a recurring issue with folks selling stuffed animals in a parking lot, right? Ted and Tyler just go out and talk to them. We ask the person to voluntarily stop and go get a permit. And usually they stop and go away. Some come and get a permit. And that's the type of community engagement. Let's just talk to people and help people become compliant where we can. Another example would be neglect. Inoperable vehicles. Usually when we have an inoperable vehicle and it's not a repeat offender, Ted Tyler just call them, say, can you move this because we're going to issue VIO in 5 days. And then the planning director will document that's been issued, that we've had that conversation, and if it's not moved, then we'll issue the VIO. So we're trying to find ways to help solve problems rather than just simply be a hammer. When it is time, though, to issue a violation, there's some important considerations that we have to take into account before a violation is issued. One of them is that there has to be clear, objectable, and defensible documentation for issuing this violation. We have to substantiate both the existence of the violation and the nature of it. Is it large enough of an issue that we just can directly send a violation? Have we done what we can to try to resolve it? We also have to be consistent. I have to consider past planning director interpretations, enforcement history, past town actions, and then when we do need to change a past interpretation or enforcement history, we're really cognizant as staff to not just do this ad hoc, either in collaboration with the manager or through board authorization as relevant. And then as we do this, we just need to be consistent. We want to ensure that we don't have claims of arbitrary or selective enforcement in our program. And the third consideration is due process and legal defensibility. There's some relevant legal principles that AICP planners are trained in. One of them is investment-backed expectation. So we need to consider some of the principles of how we manage an enforcement program to ensure that people have proper notice, due process, and an opportunity to remedy the situation. So let's say we've gone through this process. When do we actually send a VIO and what happens? Here's just a couple examples. We'd be here all night if I tried to break down each of the types of ones that we do. But here's some common ones. Yard maintenance or parking issues, the things that are just seen on a general ride around town. Our officers will document the condition and allow a reasonable time for voluntary compliance before a letter is sent or typically before we even contact folks. Let's say you go on vacation for a week and it rained and you come back and it takes you 3 days to cut your grass. In these types of situations, we recognize that people have to live their lives, right? But we do keep track of this. And then before any formal escalation, oftentimes we'll make some type of informal contact. And there's some, because of the relationships that our officers have, elderly residents. Obviously, I talked about the rental companies, folks in hardship situations. They'll try to work with folks before it reaches the level where we'll issue a violation, but we will, and we do. Another one that's really common is development without authorization. This is a little different. Contractors know they need building permits, and so we stop that work as soon as we know that there's work without an authorization. The town determines the zoning compliance issues. The county will handle the building code enforcement side of it, but we work together, and usually it's the lead inspector out here, a gentleman named Stephen Ray, and myself will go out to speak with the builder in these types of situations. This can be like demolition type stuff without authorization. It can also be things like HVAC work, anything that has to do with heavy equipment or mechanical permit. We'll stop that on site. Excuse me. Another one is parking lot sales. Site activity that might require a temporary use permit or things like that. That is immediate enforcement action as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean immediately a violation. It simply means that we'll go out there and that becomes a priority to stop those types of activity. The most challenging thing we do in the code enforcement vertical are complex zoning issues, because these touch legal, they touch case law, they touch precedents in ways that some of these other clear-cut things do not. So our enforcement approach when it comes to a complex zoning issue it really varies, kind of based on the legal complexity and evidentiary requirements. These take the most time. Some examples of like how complex zoning can touch these requirements are things like signs. Signs are notoriously difficult to manage a zoning enforcement case with because of 2 Supreme Court cases in the last 10 years, Reed versus Gilbert, Austin versus Reagan, that have changed the way that planning departments have to regulate signs. And very few UDOs, even though Reed v. Gilbert's 10 years old, very few UDOs are still fully compliant with it, we're finding. And so other than clear-cut, you can't put a sign in this location and somebody does, we tend to work with folks to avoid issuing clear-cut sign violations and tend to just try to get them compliant with the code rather than trying to create a large First Amendment issue. Another one is the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. This is an act that supersedes zoning in many cases, and it guides how planning departments regulate churches and places that house people, halfway houses and things like that. There's particular additional rights that those types of facilities have that not all zoning codes encapsulate. The other one that's very, very difficult to prove, and so we work diligently and we involve if necessary, the town attorney and the town manager in this process, are things like unauthorized home occupations. It's very hard to prove the way that our zoning code is written. And we have privacy considerations as well. We can't like spy over somebody's fence and things like that. And so those are just some examples of why some of these big zoning cases take a significant amount of time, because we want to make sure that they're done fairly, that everybody's due process is respected, and that the result is in line with our policy documents. And we emerge as a stronger community through that process. So what are some examples of code enforcement in our community? I think a very visible one is the Wedgwood Shopping Center. The mayor and several other residents had brought up that there was challenges with this shopping center, and so we went out and we looked at it.
You gotta call me out, man.
Yeah, so we did. So we know, obviously, we have relationships with both the property manager of Wedgwood, and then also Carly sees it's its own building, and so we have a relationship with them. So we told them we're coming, and Ted and Tyler did a scan of the site. We found a couple things that we didn't find before that rose to the point where we could issue a violation. And we also talked to the property manager about some of the concerns that maybe didn't rise to the level of a violation, but still, from a community development standpoint, we want to see look a little different. I mean, they acted on those things. So the building got power washed and painted. All the violations, to my knowledge, are closed on this. The somewhat separate but related was the lighting issue in the parking lot. It looks like it's fixed. Duke is reporting it as fixed, and we went out today, and there's new light bulbs and stuff that are installed. The story with that is there was a plumbing issue actually in the DMV building that was making it, that had to be fixed before they could go in and replace the lights. With our relationships with the shopping center manager, we just continue to monitor the situation here for maintenance and safety. I don't think we get credit for the working with them on the pavement. I think that was scheduled, but it looks nice. I mean, we've gotten an improved shopping center through this process, and it's incremental, and so we continue to work with them. We should continue to see maintenance and upkeep improve in the shopping center.
We'll take it. We help with the parking lot too.
This is an example of how a violation letter has resolved a fence issue. So this fence, obviously at top, was broken. A violation letter was issued, and the fence is fixed. And so sometimes it takes a more direct approach to fix some of these issues. And in this case, you can see here that it has been fixed. So tall grass is, most of our violations this time of year are tall grass related. Not everybody complies, right? So after 30 days, if your tall grass if it's still tall, we can move through what's called an abatement process, which is effectively we'll mow it and then lien the property on it. And so this is what an abatement letter looks like. It's signed by the town manager. I don't think Katie signed any yet this year, although I think some are coming. Yeah, then the Public Works Department will mow the grass, and then it will be charged back to the property owner. This is one process that I think we can all work together on improving. We have some abatement violators, I guess, who just say, oh, just mow it and lien me. At some point, we need to come up with a different solution here. But these are things that we'll work through in time as the town continues to grow, as these issues begin to rise to the point where it's time to do something about it. And that brings us perfectly to this next part here, the next steps here. There's a variety of next steps in code enforcement as the town grows. One is that we're working on improving how we track violations for a couple reasons. One is that state law allows for us to keep a registry of single-family rentals, of rental properties in general, that are recurring violators. And so we need to determine, we're going through a process right now to determine if we have a broad enough issue that we can begin this registry. This isn't a significant change in workload because we have this stuff documented anyways when we issue a violation. We're just organizing it a little different and keeping track of these. The other one is that on patrol, what are some typical types of violations that get easily missed or overlooked that don't require an expansion of capacity to just go and start addressing? A big one is parking cars on sidewalks. You can't park your car if you have a sidewalk. You can't park it over the sidewalk. And so that's another one that we're working on tracking and understanding, how could we be effective in resolving that issue? The other one is providing additional opportunities for our code enforcement officers. They're both cross-trained on our permitting software, but there's some other things that we can do within code enforcement to help improve community engagement and neighborhood services. So one is training officers on preventative programs and improve community visibility. In the budget last year, the board approved a training line item for the planning department that everybody got $700, and it had to be relevant to your work. And one of the code enforcement officers is getting trained in CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design. It was a way to help work with residents to improve their properties and also improve the safety of our neighborhoods. We also encourage everybody in the department to pursue the certified zoning official designation. One code enforcement officer achieved that last year. Those are the two things we're looking at in order to retain and attract quality code enforcement officers, because we want opportunities for them to grow within the organization like every other employee. The other one is, as we move forward, collaborating with the board and with the manager on how we can expand capacity and expand the program itself. The big one being the downtown vacant properties program that to enforce, we would need to do it consistently. We don't have the capacity to do that right now. Once we understand if we can begin this rental property registration, working through what the state allows for the town to do with that will require capacity expansion as well as the outreach programs, maybe a broader CPTED program, additional neighborhood outreach. How can we continue to expand the code enforcement the code enforcement program to improve quality of life in the town of Zebulon? And so that's an overview of code enforcement, its operations, how it works, how it fits within the broader planning department. I guess the last thing I'll say is that there are other models for how code enforcement can work. Usually, though, they're in bigger cities, right? So oftentimes code enforcement lives within the planning department. Once you get to a larger city, sometimes they're their own department. And so their programs may operate a little differently. But I've worked in towns the size of Zebulon for most of my career, and this is pretty typical to how I've operated a code enforcement program. And so with that, I'm happy to help contribute to your work session as necessary on this. And thank you for wanting to learn a little more about our code enforcement efforts.
Thank you, Director Lauer. And I will just say, from your presentation, I did learn a great deal. I do have some questions, or a question. One of the things that you said was that we outsource like the building codes to Wake County. Mm-hmm. Is that something like that we could possibly, not right now, I understand, don't come this way, okay, Matt? But is that something that we could bring in-house at some point once our department grows more? Okay.
As communities grow, they tend to start insourcing the things they've had to outsource.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, and any conversations or? Don't raise your conversating. It's a work session. I'm trying to do what Commissioner Rowe like for us. Let's chat about it. Yeah. What are you thinking, Commissioner Baxter?
I just have a question about what happens when violations come in or complaints come in about, say, businesses or activities that happen after hours when we typically don't have our code enforcement agents available to go on site. How do we mitigate those problems and come up with solutions? Is that something that then falls to a different department? How do we go and investigate and take care of those calls?
Sure. Well, it depends on what the issue is. So, for example, if there's say there's a food truck that's operating on the weekends that shouldn't be, or is operating in a place that shouldn't be, if we get a timestamp picture from a police officer or from the fire marshal or from somebody who has a role in the code enforcement process, we'll go talk to the food truck. So there's that. Some issues in the right-of-way can be dealt with directly by the police department. There are some challenges. I mean, I think you rightly point out that code violations don't stop at 5 o'clock, right? And so that's these are the kinds of policy and budget questions in the future that we'll have to look at, because there's only so much capacity at night across the departments, and they're limited in terms of zoning enforcement. I mean, the police department doesn't do zoning enforcement, right? So they're limited in terms of their ability to solve. If there's a problem that's a zoning issue that needs to be solved immediately, other departments are limited in their ability to do that at night.
I was thinking less of like someone worrying about a zoning issue, but I've gotten calls before about like perceived, real or just perceived noise violations.
So noise is easy. So noise is the police department.
Okay.
So you during the daytime hours, you can call the non-emergency number. At night, you call 911. Right now, my understanding right now in the general code, it's a civil penalty though. So it's just a fine.
Right.
But that is, the planning department does not do noise violations. We'll work with the police department and help direct people to resolve them, but we don't issue civil penalties for noise violations.
But civil penalties will get issued by the police department? Okay, all right, cool.
And so if there's repeated violations of noise, does that escalate up to you? Like, how does repeated violations escalate when it's out of when it's not under
We'd
you?
have to look at see if the general code says anything specific about noise itself, because it has different. I couldn't put a list of fines up here because it'd take 3 slides because everything is different, right? And so we'd have to look at what's specific for noise and then see if there's specific escalators in that. Is there state enabling legislation? So we want the town attorney to become involved in that. So there's a couple additional steps about dealing with repeat violators, really in any case.
Okay.
But I do believe that the general code does provide some guidance about how to manage that process. But it's something we'd want the town attorney involved in for sure.
Sure. Okay. What do you think about that, Commissioner Roa?
I just really want to understand what the workflow is, why there's not enough capacity to walk down North Arundel, Zebulon Road, and take pictures of vacant buildings that are violating the code and issue letters to fix their property so they don't look vacant or disheveled, or there's overgrown trees in the lot between Armando's and the other building. The trees are overgrown. I know Katie saw me today walking downtown, and it took me 5 minutes to walk from Jernigan's, to the general store and take pictures with my phone. So I want to understand what the workflow would be for a code enforcement officer that doesn't allow us to enforce that now.
So the capacity issue is not being able to walk down the street and take the photos. We actually have that. That's not the issue. The issue is what happens afterwards. So afterwards, what would happen is everybody would get issued a letter that has this violation, and they have to effectively submit a vacancy management site plan. And then that goes through our site plan review process. And if they don't do that within, I believe it's 15 days, then we trigger a fine structure to compel them. So it's the site plan review process. If we got 30 site plans in a day, it's not quite 30, it's like 21 in 15 days, that's 3 times what we have right now in the system right now. So it would require pulling planners off of typical site plan review to manage these reviews for about a month. And then on top of that, not everybody's going to comply, right? So then we've got an issue where now we have to go through this pretty robust fine structure. It's $500 every day you don't comply. And so there could be capacity constraints on the planning department for that. There might be for other departments, but it's that level of coordination that level of change, I should say, in enforcement is not something that I'm comfortable as a planning director just deciding to do, right? I mean, that's a significant change in how we do business, and that's okay. I mean, cities should change as they grow, but to do it, one, I want to make sure we have the capacity to manage that site plan process fairly, and then 2, make sure that this is an organizational change. This is an ad hoc decision to go through what's one of our most aggressive penalty structures in the general code.
I just, I've been talking about this for forever, and I think I submitted a plan to Mayor Harrison regarding a subcommittee for downtown. And I went and I spoke to certain businesses downtown to see if they would like to volunteer on the board, and they said they would, certain representatives downtown. And maybe when we hear it from them directly, that they feel that allowing these businesses to look disheveled and empty and decrepit is hurting their business and not helping them in any kind of way is going to get us to move on, trying to make a change in that ordinance. I don't own a business downtown, but every time I go somewhere to buy coffee or pizza or do light shopping at a thrift store, I may hear, people discuss, what's going on with some of these buildings downtown. And all I can say to them is what we've been saying is, well, we keep bringing it up, we keep asking, and, this is just where we're at. So I don't intend to put extra pressure on you or on you, but in this work session, I'm just hoping to relay, a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people felt that way about the shopping center. And it took the mayor drilling, and we finally got the lights on and it's cleaned up, but it can't stop there. I don't know, do we need to have people doing some call-ins? Because it seems like you have them handling call-ins throughout part of the day. Do you want citizens to call in the violations as they see them and then they'll get handled that way, or are you just not taking on any of those violations at the moment?
The way that it's written in the general code is written as programmatic enforcement. And so what I don't want to, we have to apply the same due process and evidentiary requirements to a call-in about the vacant building registry as we would to any other enforcement issue, right? So either we do it programmatically or we find a different way to achieve the intent. I'm agnostic as to which direction, right, that the board wants to go, but there are downstream impacts one way or the other. Finding a different intent means that the enforcement looks different, and it's less enforcement and more engagement. The flip side is that if it's the will of the board to move forward and build a program and do programmatic enforcement, the way that ordinance is written, it's enforcement. I mean, there's little wiggle room for when you're not compliant with the code. And so it's all about trying to find a way to achieve the public purpose of what was adopted and do it in a way that's not only fair, but that's effective.
Do you know off the top of your head what other cities do if there are vacant properties that look in this condition? Are the fines more egregious? Or
I have never worked in a community that had this ordinance. Now, I do know that other communities in North Carolina do. Mm-hmm. It's not a unique thing to Zebulon. Downtowns are tricky and they take time to develop because it's not one or two entities you're working with. You're working with, in our case, there's 67 total buildings, and there's probably 40 owners across them or more, right? So there's a coordination component of it. That's why the small area plan process, I think, is really important to the development of downtown, because it helps us better coordinate development efforts through that. This isn't to say that there aren't opportunities to work with property owners to improve their properties as well. As you know, there's 3 buildings downtown that don't have roofs, and we're working through. One of them has an active building permit again, right? So we're working through that with them. So there are other kind of longer-term avenues to deal with that. And then, occasionally, when a building or when there's issues where there's a building enforcement problem, that tends to be where the most egregious violators then get dealt with as well. So it's a conglomeration of a lot of things. If the direction of the town is let's find a way to do this programmatically, of course we'll support it and do it programmatically. To do it right now would require changing the way that we manage operations, at least for an intermediate period. And so that's just something that, as a director, I think that the board should know, that it would change the way that we have to do business.
I think that,
I was just going to say, I would be interested to hear what the rest of the board thinks, if they've heard feedback about, if they've noticed vacancies, or if they've heard from the community members their concern.
Well, what I will say, I have a few things. What I will say to start off, as a matter of public and optics, I think that sometimes it's it's subjective to what you're looking for and to what people are looking for. When you look at, as I stated to Director Lauer when it came to the Wedgwood Shopping Center, my concern was, how do we drive economic development if the current businesses within the community are not, taking appearance and optics to heart, right? And so I have the same sentiments for our downtown area. For me, I haven't necessarily, I've heard people say, why are these buildings empty? Why don't we have businesses? But I have not had it looks decrepit like that is not something. But what I would like to see and would like to talk to you all about, I would really love to take this to the Eastern Wake local government and talk to Wendell, Knightdale, Roseville, and Zebulon and see how are especially those communities that have, like Wendell, that have started their downtown looked, were you here then? Their downtown looked very similar to ours at one point in time. And so with vacant properties, with vacant buildings. So I would love to get some feedback from other communities on what that process looked like, especially as they were growing and are growing the way that we are. So, yeah. Davis, Adams, anything?
I agree with George. I walk downtown, and I've heard people ask about, I'm sorry. I've walked downtown in the past, and I've heard people talk about the buildings, and there's a few buildings that are poor, right? And people are like, what's going on with that? I'm like, well, it's a great question. Right? It's a great, all of them are all great questions, but yeah, we do need to address those issues, though. I think it's important.
I think for me, I've had a frustration for years since we passed the ordinance that required vacant buildings to have some kind of signage up or covering in the windows, and that was never enforced. And so I think for a lot of people, especially when the buildings have been purchased or they are under contract and they're starting to be rehabbed, folks don't understand that, and we haven't been enforcing that ordinance. I would really like, that would be a great first start to at least say, you've got to at least bring it up to here. If it's sitting vacant, it might be sitting vacant because you're working on permits or you're working on getting the right contractor in. And I know that sometimes in this, day and age, especially having to fight for contractors with, spots in Wake County and different projects across Eastern Wake County, it might be a little bit more difficult, but we should be at least enforcing that particular ordinance so that at least things don't look run down. I have never, ever, ever, except out of Commissioner Roa's mouth, had anyone describe our downtown as decrepit. I have had them ask me questions about what's happening with certain buildings because they look empty. And that, I think, is certainly a valid question, since we have a tool in our toolbox to make it look not empty while investors and developers are working and business owners are working to bring it to a point where it can be open. Right now we have only 9 vacancies. Is that correct? The number's very low.
The total number, the percentage of vacant downstairs storefronts is, when I gave the presentation, I'm trying to remember, when I gave a presentation a while back, it will be less than 15% if all of the current things in our current projects they achieve a CO. In the past 18 months, there's 9 full interior retrofits. So whatever the number is now, 18 months ago was 9 more than that. And I think that that's reflected of kind of the push and pull the approach that we've had, where we have, as a town government have tried to achieve some of the intent of that ordinance through the Main Street signs. So there's some of trying to push people to align with the policy, and then we're trying to pull people in and let's get projects done, and let's improve the way that we do permitting so we can get things done faster and more effectively. And so there are 9 interior design and completely interior retrofits that have occurred. There are, I don't quote me on the number, but there's probably 9 or more vacant storefronts still that aren't subject to a zoning compliance permit right now. So there's certainly work to be done. I think that the downtown is in a transition period, and it's going to go through several more, right, as the community grows. But what I've seen in the past 18 months being here has been an upward trend, at least in the bringing buildings up to modern standards.
And I agree. That's a very, very expensive part of bringing a building back to life, is doing all of the small things that necessarily, don't affect the outward appearance, like upgrading the sprinkler system and making sure the foundation is sound. But I myself would like to see a little bit more enforcement just around that one particular ordinance, just so that we don't get the kind of questions like, boy, it seems like there are quite a few buildings vacant, because sometimes we have folks that have purchased a building and they just don't have anything in it yet. And we need to be a little bit more proactive. Welcome to Zebulon. You need to do these things in order to remain compliant. We're happy to have you, and we're going to help you along the way. But this is what this is what we need to see from you.
Yeah.
One thing we could do to that effect, if there's something that y'all are interested in doing, is when a zoning compliance permit is pulled for a downtown building as part of the building permit. So typically, when you're doing a remodel, for example, and you pull a building permit, the town needs to know what you're pulling the building permit for, so we can determine if you can legally operate that business there. So in those situations, what we could do is, for anything in the downtown core, we could put a note for the planning tech when she goes through this. Say every time there's a downtown core one, they need to show that they're going to shield the public from the work on the inside, because the work can take a year, right? So that could be I don't think I can condition zoning compliance permits, but it can be a listed expectation when we deliver it in the building permit context.
Yeah, I was going to say a consistent standard.
Not brown paper.
Yeah,
Not black plastic.
Yeah.
Because we did have it, I thought, in
Yeah, all right, cool.
thought that was part of what we had written into the ordinance. And so if we could just.
Can you share that ordinance?
If we need to get, refresh that to make it so that it works better to achieve our goals, then let's do that. All of I've gone through all of my packets from years, and I just can't find that particular one. I remember when we did it, but I don't remember what the date was. I'm sure that would be much easier for you guys to pull. But I think that we all agree, the spirit of what we would like to see is something, not just bare minimum compliance. We would like to see something a little bit more upstyled for the window signage. And I thought that was in there, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe the verbiage needs to be tweaked.
Yeah, and
The verbiage leaves a lot open to interpretation.
All right, well-
A little more direct could be a recommendation that, as we go through this, I think it'd be easy for me to give. And the second one is some type of clear standard around what that is.
Okay,
right?
so
So not
let's
just a
figure
sign,
that
but
out.
what is the sign? Do we provide it? Where do you get it? Something so the enforcement component of this isn't evaluating a vacancy management plan and a site plan each time.
so those, the poster things, Katie, you know what I'm talking about? Coming soon. I think that is.
They have wraps that you can put on.
You can put a
the
tint,
windows.
like a double-sided window tint. I know that's one of the,
Oh yeah.
to just make it reflective. Just
Yeah.
in that ordinance, right? It is very punitive, And I think I'm in an HOA. Nothing makes people bring their garbages in off their street or mow their lawn like a $50 fine. I get them all the time. I'm like, oh, I gotta pay
Do you
$50.
really?
Then I gotta
better.
bring my garbage in. I know that that's the creature that I am, right? But at least maybe we soften the blow and we send a letter in the beginning and say, hey, your property was identified as vacant. Let's just start there, right? Vacant. Could you please A, B, C, D, this is the type of material, this is an example. Could you apply this to your window because it benefits the rest of the DTC like this? And then give them 30 days. At least let's try to do something uniform, right? And if we have any money, maybe in the the downtown, what is it? The Main Street is making these signs, I'm assuming, so it costs money. Maybe if they can provide a wrap or something to assist these businesses,
Or just provide some various examples
Yeah.
that would be acceptable. And so
Yeah.
could you, of course, after we get the budget, get our budget all put together and out, work on what that might look like and some examples, whether it's like a reflective wrap, or I know that we've got one business that's got one that's like Inspire. There was the old ice cream
Yeah,
store.
yeah,
And, and then we have the
Coming
posters.
soon.
So I
I
mean,
like
like, we've got some folks that are complying already. I would just like to see, like you said, more uniform, but so that they don't all have to be the same thing. I mean, there are some great examples out there when you go into different downtowns of what they require on their windows when their buildings are not being utilized.
Yeah, and I think that ensuring that as we do this consistently, Manager Crosby, I want to make sure I'm directing things to you, and to Matt, but ensuring that it's our current businesses and the ones that are coming. We want a consistent appearance in our downtown quarter. We want to attract new businesses. We want to support our current businesses. And the first way that we're able to do that is by appearance. We're a growing community. People want to come here. We want people to stay here. And so I think our goal collectively is that we want to ensure that if we're going to continue to be strategic about making our downtown vibrant, then we have to at least start with making it look welcoming enough where people want to hang out down there or make it vibrant, or you know what I mean? And so our goal is to direct you all to come up with a plan, a consistent plan, where the downtown corridor has a consistent look and feel. Yeah?
Yes.
And I know that we've got a couple of buildings right now that are vacant. It would be nice to at least, reach out and say, the first thing that you can do, because we understand that it might take a little bit for full compliance, is to take down your old awning. Take down the awning. That's a first step, and that will actually improve the look of the building. And then, when you get that done, we'll give you a month to do that, and then we can talk to you about like what the next steps are to come into compliance.
Yeah.
Because taking down an awning will take an hour.
And maybe we could, I would ask the board and the mayor, maybe we could help. I know Armando, right? Like, for example, if something happened to his business, I can say, hey, we're trying to revitalize downtown. Would you be able to put something on your windows? Maybe if we reach out to them, or we're having that one-to-one conversation and it's just about the overall goal and mission for downtown, and it's not we're singling you out or we're trying to, punish you, maybe that might land different if they receive a call from the mayor, like, hey, we'd like to, I don't know. If I had a business and you called me and said, hey, it's the mayor, I'd be like, hey, what can I do for you? So
All right.
just throwing it out there. I don't know.
No, I hear what you're saying. I think that I like that the idea, Commissioner Roa is definitely a real estate guy, and I respect that his profession and his, his view. So I think that this conversation is long overdue, and I'm glad that we're able to come to a solution. So, if you could just get us something that speaks to consistency and ensuring that downtown feels and looks like people want to be there. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Director Lauer. And now we will be, is the board, everybody good? Yeah? Okay. All right, we're going to move to Parks and Rec Master Plan. Director Long, hello.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about our master plan. And you've probably got a copy of this or seen it online or heard me reference it. But as you can see, we work in and out of it all the time. That's my personal copy that is falling apart. So we really believe it's our blueprint and our guideline for how we can grow and continue to serve our community. With me tonight, I have Drew Crumpton, who's been along this process with us. He is with AECOM. He was engaged in the development of our master plan, and he's also helped with other site plans for the town, and they're currently working on Gulf Street Park and Community Park. I think it's important to understand what a master plan is, and a comprehensive Parks and Rec master plan is a long-range planning document that helps shape the direction, the development, and the delivery of the town's parks and recreation facilities. It is based on a comprehensive approach, considering previous planning efforts, departmental goals, existing conditions, and a needs assessment to shape a framework for recommendations and prioritization strategies. And it's driven by the town's desire to improve the quality of life for Zebulon residents by providing excellent parks and community facilities and recreation opportunities for a diverse, growing population. Prior to 2019, the town did not have a comprehensive Parks and Rec master plan. It had not had one in the past. There had been some efforts in a joint open space planning effort. I believe it was with Wendell and Zebulon that had been done many, many, many years ago, but it really was not a comprehensive plan for parks and recreation for the town of Zebulon. So this was a big deal for the town. It was a huge undertaking, but what you were also experiencing and facing was significant growth. There had been a good amount of growth from about 2014 to 2019. But you were rapidly growing. So when we started this plan, you were a population of about 6,000. And just to give you some perspective, and when we were looking and doing our due diligence of this process and collecting data, the estimated population, the midpoint for 2030 was 12,946. Your population today is 14,107. We have grown a little bit faster than what was considered the low end, but we are already surpassing the median end for 2030. And so we've seen a lot of rapid growth in our community, a lot of demand on your park system, and a lot of demand on your programs. Another way to recognize what that growth looks like is you'll hear later in the presentation information about the recreation impact fee. And if you break that down and the total that is charged and divide it by the amount per single family unit, it comes down to 2,420 new homes since the implementation of the recreation impact fee. So that just shows that growing demand on recreation in this community. And when we were preparing for what we saw coming as significant growth to the town of Zebulon, and we had never had a park plan, there wasn't an operational structure plan. Our master plan is a little bit unique. I'm not going to say we're the only ones that have ever done this, but our plan was exceptionally thorough in that it didn't just focus on the comprehensive parks. It focused on how do we prepare at large for parks and recreation in this community. So our plan process included an operational assessment, it included a staff assessment, it included a program assessment, but we also took the opportunity to do the recreation impact fee study at the same time, which is incredibly unique. And it put us in a position to be able to move quickly to secure funds that were dedicated to making the improvements that were recognized as needs for the master plan for our growing community. And so your plan has a lot of information in it. Through this process, and specifically with the operation assessment, some things came out that needed to be immediate changes that were necessary because we were not prepared then as an organization, our structure, our processes. If you recall, in 2019, we were still paper and pencil if you wanted to come and register to play basketball with us, or you wanted to be in a summer camp. It was by paper. We weren't even electronic in 2018. So there were a lot of operational things that had to change. And the consultant that came out to do that operational assessment felt that he needed to make a recommendation to the town to move fast, don't wait on your master plan, that there were some critical changes that needed to be made. And the board supported those changes as we were working towards adopting the master plan. And so at this time, I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna turn it over to Drew, and he's gonna talk with you about the process.
All right, thanks Sheila, and thank you all for having me here again. The rest of the presentation, we're going to go through the process of the master plan, some of the things that came out of that, and then also touch on how things have progressed since then. So what also is unique about this plan is there have been a lot of achievements since it's been finished. I could name all kinds of communities I've worked in, up to very, very large cities that do these plans, and then they just let them sit there and never really make any progress. So it's pretty good achievement for what's been done here. But as Sheila mentioned, we started this in 2019, and the way the process typically goes, it's just a four-step process with research and analysis and the community needs assessment. Those two are kind of running hand in hand, and all that information helps us establish the shared community needs and priorities that ultimately will launch us into vision development and then developing specific recommendations. Unfortunately, we got through those first two phases with a lot of great momentum, and then come early 2020, we had the shock of COVID-19, but I do give everybody credit. We kind of rallied pretty well and got through the vision and development while still keeping the community engaged, and then adopted it in 2021 with a great plan. So going through each of these phases now, I'll just go over a brief overview of what goes into each of them. So with the system inventory analysis is all about understanding the existing system as well as the surrounding community from a plan and metric standpoint. So we look at demographic analysis to understand growth trends and growth characteristics. We look at all the plans that have been done previously, so we make sure whatever we are doing is building off of efforts that have already been completed, so we can show that continuation through all of those. We do an individual park evaluation of every park in the system. And then as Sheila mentioned, we also had a pretty thorough program and operation and maintenance assessment just to get a sense of where the department is now and where they need to go to address the coming growth. And then level of service, which is essentially how well the park system is serving the community now and into the future as it grows. So we did that by acreage and facilities per population, but what we really tried to focus on is access. So how easy is it to walk to a park or bike to a park, and where are some of those gaps, and try to align those with places that we're seeing growth. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. But then after we have all this information, we get into benchmarking. So we looked at some comparable communities in the region as well as across the state, just to kind of see how we stacked up against them, what they did that we liked, and where we wanted to go from there. So then, as I said, sort of simultaneously, once we felt like we had enough understanding to start talking to the community, we did the community needs assessment phase, and that began with meeting with the advisory board, making sure that we have them on board first and they understand the process and can help us engage with the community and get more people out to the public events. We also talked to focus groups and stakeholder interviews, which are small groups, and then one-on-one interviews with special interest groups that are kind of organized by themes, and then key stakeholders like elected officials and community members that we talk to individually. We did have one pretty awesome community meeting that we did kind of right before all the craziness of the pandemic, but as you can see, we had a very good turnout to that one. And then the town actually did a great job of running small meetings as well at places like schools and other community events with, assistance from us, material-wise, but they kind of did the heavy lifting on those, but just making sure that we're going to where people are and getting their input there. And then we had a series of surveys, online survey that anyone can access, and then mail out statistically valid surveys as well. So in that engagement process, we had about 700 people participate. And as you'll see later, that has continued to compound as we've gone through all kinds of other efforts since this plan. So common engagement things we saw during this process, obviously, the overlying issue from the start was always addressing and anticipating growth. One thing we always see most of the time when we're doing these plans is greenways, trails, natural areas are always going to rise to the top, and that was no different here. Everybody had a lot to say about Little River Park. They wanted to see that improved. We also wanted to see improvement at Zebulon Community Park, expanding some of those facilities there, like a larger community center and more athletic fields. We also had a lot of interest in special events, particularly in downtown, and the desire to have some sort of downtown venue like a park or event space. Splash pad and water play was a big thing, dog parks, increasing the variety of programming. And then what was a little interesting on this one is we did hear that people wanted to know more about what was available. So that's something that we see sometimes, but people understood that there were things there. They just wanted to hear more about them and know when and where they could participate. So from there, we got to the vision development. And when we were doing this, we were still kind of in the throes of COVID. So we did a lot of this virtually, but it actually turned out pretty well. We had a series of workshops with staff and advisory board that we held virtually, but they were very interactive and focused on developing an overall vision and kind of this long-term overarching theme of what we would like the department to move forward with, and then break that down into visual goals. And so once this was all over, we put together a presentation that covered everything we did and went through it in detail, and then posted that so the public could respond and provide feedback as well. So two things that came out of this. What we wanted to start with a mission statement and then a vision statement. So the mission statement is for the department. What is the department's purpose? So the mission of the Zebulon Parks and Recreation Department is to connect all people in the community through quality parks, facilities, and programs. And so then the vision statement is, how do you want to achieve that? And how do you want to move forward with that mission? And so that's to create recreational and cultural opportunities that enhance quality of life and connect our residents through positive impacts on health and wellness, social interaction, economic growth, and environmental stewardship. So as I said, we started high level and then wanted to go a little bit lower down and start to work towards what are going to be our priorities and recommendations. But before we established that, we had to think about what are the goals? What are we trying to achieve within this vision? So we have this list here that has kind of the overall theme on the side, and then a little more detail, but it's really offer comprehensive services, make sure that everybody's utilizing innovative practices, particularly when it comes to planning and design and programming operation, ensure we're engaging the community anytime we go through planning or implementation of this plan. Provide quality, diverse parks, facilities, and programs for everyone of all abilities, so making sure we're inclusive in everything we do. Collaborate with economic development, downtown partners, and community developers. Provide access to natural areas and environmental education, utilizing the resources that we have. Ensure equitable access to parks facilities, particularly walkable access to make sure people have what they need in their neighborhood. And then provide exceptional service to everybody, no matter their background or ability. And so from there, we also, in terms of writing all this down, we wanted to visualize what our vision looks like. So I mentioned before the level of service and how we had focused on access. So what we did was think about a couple of things. One, where are we seeing gaps in park service and where are we seeing growth? So we overlaid some of the plan developments that we know are coming and identified some areas where, in the future we might want to target land acquisition to ensure that we're maintaining access locally for the people that are moving in, as well as maintaining access for the people that already live here. And one thing we also wanted to look at too is how are we going to connect our system? So you'll see a lot of greenway lines on there, but it's essentially using the resources and the corridors we have to ensure that we're connecting our park system so that we have walkable, bikeable access for everybody. And so also out of the vision, we come up with the subsystems. So this is where we really start to dive into some of the things that are going to drive the priorities moving forward, particularly when it comes to capital projects. So I'll go through these pretty quickly, but we have Community parks and athletic fields, so that really focuses on continuing to provide outdoor athletic spaces, expanding on what we have, finding more ways to have multi-use, flexible facilities to meet a growing demand of needs, and also have water-based recreation opportunities. And then we have neighborhood parks and open spaces, so that's really focusing more at the neighborhood level. So we're continuing to provide a high level of service through our neighborhood parks, so everyone has the opportunity to walk or bike to something close by that meets their recreation needs. And falling under that as well is the development of a downtown park, and just assuring that all the parks we have and will develop in the future are continuing to be high quality and have the amenities that our community wants to see. Natural areas, I think that one kind of speaks for itself. We really had a lot of support from natural areas throughout the process, particularly with Little River Park and identifying some of these key corridors that connect some of the larger recreation areas in the regions. Community health and our programs, community health and special events. So we know programs are very important to the people of this town, so we want to continue to provide high quality programs while expanding when we can, so through a greater availability. And then, at the time, and I think this is something that's really become something that's come out of this, is the special events, which have continued to grow. And as we've seen at all the special events we've been to, that they're very well attended, and it seems like something that people really value here. So, and the last one, regional connectivity and access. So, throughout the process, as I mentioned, we wanted to think about how we could connect our parks and get people to where they want to go from the neighborhoods they live in to these recreational areas. So we looked at kind of two ways to do that. One is we realized that through Little River Park and some of the plans for Wake County, there is an opportunity to connect much larger green corridors throughout the region, but also within the town, we develop what we call the green spine, which is essentially that green piece running through the middle that's anchored at 5 County Stadium and Little River Park that connects our neighborhoods in the downtown core and Zebulon Community Park, and then branches off into other neighborhoods. So really creating this great network of connectivity and access that uses our park system as the framework for that. All right, so the last phase of the plan is the recommendations and implementation strategy. So we have our vision now, and we have these ideas that we want to put forward. So how are we going to get those done? So that starts with prioritization, which, what do you want to do first? What's the most important, and what are some low-hanging fruit that we can go ahead and get done now? What are the most important things that'll keep community momentum going? Then from there, looking at developing a funding strategy for these items, how we could phase some of them to utilize funding we have now, as well as work on future funding once we can get the project going. And then, on the department side, looking at program recommendations, operational changes or improvements, and policies that can help make sure that, some of these more capital improvements we've proposed are more readily achievable once they come online. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sheila to walk through some of the specific things that have come out of that and where we are with the status of those now.
All right, so after we finished with that vision section and we moved into this implementation strategy, there was a prioritization and implementation workshop where we worked with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to look at all of the recommendations that had come through over the entire process, and we started to prioritize how they fail. And the high priority items were to improve the existing parks, to focus on the east to west greenway, cohesive park branding, a downtown park and alleyway, greenways in our neighborhoods, community park expansion and field consolidation, active parks with programs, and the Little River corridor. And I think it's a great opportunity to recognize kind of where we are. What you'll hear today is I'll highlight what the recommendations were in a brief status. It's not necessarily going to be everything, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have work to still do. So we definitely will continue to work and have more work to do as our capacity grows. So when it comes to our existing parks, you've seen there's been landscape improvements. We worked on our sight lines. We've made improvements to our dugout, our walking tracks. We started to make renovations or plan for renovations of our basketball courts and our playgrounds, and you saw a lot of that. starting to move. We are working with developments whenever possible to focus on that eastern-west greenway. We're also looking at Community Park and Little River Park will be trailheads for the future greenway that comes through. So as we plan those parks, we're recognizing that they will be opportunities for people to connect into that east to west greenway. We will require funding to further work through the design phase, but there are several opportunities for us to work with developers as you start having infill along Gannon. And we've also worked through the Wander app program and working with the planning department. There was also the downtown connector greenway piece where we have actually been able to identify walkable connections from the neighborhoods on Old Bun Road to your downtown, which will ultimately connect to that green spine greenway. When you look at cohesive park branding, it's not just signage, it's not just color, but it also, when you have branding of a park, when you come to this park, it looks like a Zebulon park, that you don't have inconsistent landscaping, so each park can have its unique, cultural, thriving neighborhood investment in it, but you also want to make sure that you have consistent landscaping across the board to be able to ensure you have maintenance. Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, just a question. We have strong passion about branding right now. So I was just wondering, for that part where you say like consistent, cohesive park branding, how are we achieving that part without does that like a fresh or a town brand? So when we go through branding, will we have to go through and rebrand all of our parks to make them yes? Okay, never mind. Thanks.
One of the things, when I first got here, Sheila asked me about branding, and we put it on pause until we have the strategic plan done. I'm thinking that will probably come out of the strategic plan.
Okay.
That there'll be a need for branding, but it'll be consistent with wayfinding and other things
Sure.
like that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things that you'll see when I think branding. I try to let's look outside of just the what we traditionally view as branding as the colors and the signage, and it's our amenities match, and that this park has the same quality of amenities as that park, right? And also that when we have maintenance standards, that we are consistent with how we maintain them. So we're looking at our branding in that same way as well. So while we've not been able to address the signage yet, as we work with these new park plans, we will work consistently with a branding process. But as we open these or renovate these parks and have new opening opportunities for these parks, we'll make sure that any signage that we develop can be adjusted or
Great.
can coordinate with a future branding.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
When it comes to the downtown park and alleyways, the town has acquired multiple downtown properties since the adoption of this plan already. So we, as a Parks and Rec department, when we started this plan, we did not have the downtown Main Street program or the economic development department. And so we have been trying to work collaboratively in that effort, in that as you do your downtown area study, how that park falls and how these properties are utilized will continue to be massaged. We've done 3 alley activation efforts, and there's absolutely additional opportunity that we would love to continue to work on. We continue to work with developers. You've got 2.25 miles of constructed greenway since the adoption of this plan, as well as 1.1 miles in progress and 2.35 miles that have been approved to be built, or to be approved from the construction drawing phase. When you look at community park expansion, we are currently in the design phase. You've adopted a park plan. We're in conversation looking at how we can gain additional athletic fields, so talking with East Wake Academy. We've also had conversations with Zebulon Middle School about partnerships to work with both of those schools, and we'll have another grant opportunity this fall if we wanted to pursue an LWCF grant to help with some of the renovations, specifically at Community Park. When you look at activating our parks with programs, we have done things like popsicles in the park, we've done pickleball tournaments, we've had socials in our parks, we've got a track program that's moving outside of what we've done traditionally, and those are just some examples. With the Little River Corridor, you adopted a park plan, you've got phase 1 designed, you're under construction. Wake County is working to purchase and or obtain greenway easements along the river, along the corridor that will ultimately connect Wendell to Zebulon to Rollsville. So they've been working on that continuously. What is it? Okay. The funding strategy and phasing was the next section of your implementation. I'm combining the two because I think they go together. When you look at continuing to refine the department CIP and prioritize projects, prior to this master plan, there was not a parks CIP. You now have one. It is updated with the budget process unless there's another desire, and you did update your parks CIP in November of this year, and so that's something we'll continue to work with as the town revises and refines the CIP process at large for the town. When looking at utilizing existing greenways and walkability funding while seeking partnerships with Wake County and developers, there's ongoing development investment in greenways and walkable connections. We are engaging with Wake County in planning efforts and even some of our neighboring communities on how we'll be able to connect via sidewalk or greenway. We are in partnership with the Triangle Trails Initiative to encourage walkability and to identify potential partners and funding opportunities. So there's great opportunity there. There's reference to a walkability funding. At the time of this adoption of this plan, there was a 50-cent tax that was dedicated to walkability. I don't believe that we still have that, but it is something that it's referring to here that we don't have as a funding stream at this time. You also had the recommendation of the recreation impact fee, which would expand capacity at existing parks, but it also would acquire and develop new parkland to serve your new citizens. To date, you have collected $7.2 million. Multiple existing park amenity expansion projects are in progress, and neighborhood parks are pending land acquisition. We talked about phased approaches to make these projects happen. You're seeing that with Little River Park, Community Park, and Gill Street Park. Other funding opportunities include grants and general obligations. We have secured $2,659,000 in grant funds to date since this plan was adopted. That is 48% above the anticipated grant amount to be collected by 2030 for your projects. There's more discussion needed regarding a general obligation bond. And I also wanted to add this opportunity to say that we should go back and consider starting a nonprofit. This wasn't necessarily identified as a funding strategy in the master plan, but I do think that it is an opportunity that we should pursue, and that's starting a nonprofit to fundraise for park development and enhance partnership opportunities. This computer has a mind of its own today. I'm not sure when it's gonna jump forward. When it comes to programming and the recommendations that came from that assessment, when we look at continuing to grow, we had youth sports, we had some events, we had health and wellness, we had some things for teens. What you're seeing is an ongoing effort to continue to grow those. We've had an 83% growth in athletics since 2022. We have a year-round calendar of events. We have wellness partners, and we've also started the teen council. New priorities with focus areas of adult and seniors, aquatics, special needs, nature, and adventure. That is also an ongoing effort to grow. We have brought back adult softball. We've done Little Gardeners, special needs outreach and partners. We've done swimming camps as well. We've developed a program plan that has been completed, and we do an annual program matrix where we look at all of the different targeted community let's say, targeted community members, and the different areas that we're wanting to serve. So is it, special needs? Is it athletics? Is it nature programming? And we look to see where we have gaps, and we try to focus our programming in those areas. We also we're recommended to have a robust marketing plan. We do have some limited capacity, but that is growing with the establishment of the communication department. And you have seen us do things like making sure that we have information tents and information and things that community members can take with them at events, things that can be made available when new trash cans are delivered through our public works department, working with different organizations to make sure that we are getting our message out to the community. And we also continue to track our programs. When we look at the recommendations that came from the operations and maintenance impacts on facilities and program expansion, there was additional full-time staff and maintenance resources are going to be necessary as parks, facilities, and programs grow. We did a staff restructuring to prepare for the future. We expanded staff to keep up with growth and demand, and that's something that will continue. When looking at contracting for maintenance and programs, or to look at contract for maintenance and programs is going to be essential. That is ongoing. An example is cemetery maintenance, crazy running track program, as well as the tennis block, tennis and pickleball lessons. Those are just some examples. Developing a detailed maintenance plan for current and future facilities will be essential. We've completed that. We update it annually as needed and consistent with the available resources and any additional park facilities or amenities that are acquired. When you look at policy recommendations, there was a recommendation to revise the level of service from 15 acres per 1,000 or by 1,000 residents and 1 mile walkability by 2030. Your land acquisition, you'll have to acquire land acquisition to meet the walkability level of service. Your current level of service is 12 acres per 1,000 residents. If you were to move forward with a partnership with East Wake Academy and Zebulon Middle School, it would get you closer to the recommendation of 15 acres per 1,000. Developing a land acquisition strategy, we have developed a policy to help guide us with that. We were recommended to create a new community member outreach program. I referenced some of that when I talked about the robust marketing planning, but we also have our rec on the go that we can go out into the community with, and you'll see our trailer whenever we go out. So you see us, there's a QR code, you can scan it, find us on rec desk. We do direct mailers to the community as well. And then that goes back into increased branding, messaging, and marketing. That's also where we can tie in that park landscape and consistency, our amenities. We will have some new park signage as we work on these new park designs and construction projects, but we will make sure that as they get implemented, they are consistent with any adopted branding or that we can make revisions as necessary. When looking at engaging adults and families, we've added adult socials, which are pretty fun to watch depending on what activities they're doing. The pickleball tournaments are very popular. They typically fill up. And we've also got additional open gym just as some examples, not to limit everything we've done. But that's just a brief oversight of what the recommendations were and some examples of how we've achieved those recommendations.
And so with all those achieved recommendations, I'm going to go into just a few more specifics on some of these capital projects and then touch on kind of some things that are maybe in the future as we move through these projects. So
Sean,
first off,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Before you get started, we're going to need to take a 5-minute recess, okay?
Okay.
All right, 5-minute recess. Thank you.
Gotta hold it in because tonight.
Okay, thanks. So as I said, I just wanted to go through some specific efforts that have occurred since the 2021 adoption. So recognizing that the population had grown rather significantly even since the adoption of the first plan, before, a Little River Park had already gone forward, but before the department moved forward with any other capital projects, they wanted to go back out to the community and take advantage of some special event opportunities that were coming up soon and re-engage with the community and basically present everything that we did during the vision and recommendation stage of the master plan and validate that these were still priorities. So it also gave us a really unique opportunity that has kind of shaped all of our engagement since then, but we started to align with special events like the Gill Street Cookout and Rock the Block, and we really saw a bump in participation by doing that. And so while we did still have an online component, we had a pretty substantial in-person component as well that helped spread the word about everything we were doing. So we felt that was pretty successful and kind of helped pave the way for the subsequent master plans that came after this. So as I mentioned, the first site-specific plan was Little River Park. I would say during the original master planning process, Little River Park was probably the most talked about of the parks. And through some unique funding opportunities, that one was able to move forward first. So we completed the site-specific plan in 2022. Funding was achieved through general fund, recreation impact funds, and a part-of grant. And then phase one design of that was initiated in 2024 and completed in 2026. And construction is underway. It's expected to be completed late 2026 or early 2027.
We're very excited about it and can't wait.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are.
So another project that we're all pretty familiar with now is Gill Street Park. So that one again received a lot of attention during the master plan process and again during the How We Play engagement process. There was an engagement effort held alongside How We Play just for this specific park in 2023, as well as some DEQ soil tests that occurred in 2024. Yes. Given the results of the DEQ soil tests, we had to shift our thinking a little bit to respond to some of the environmental concerns at that site. So not only did we envision what happens with the existing site in its current state, we had to think about how we were going to achieve the community's priorities at a different site. So that's when we identified the new Gill Street Park site that we completed a site-specific master plan for in 2025. Had another great turnout for that one as well, and funding of that design for phase one was achieved through the general fund, and it is currently underway. And so an additional soil assessment of this site, although not in the delineated impacted areas identified by DEQ, there is an additional assessment being initiated. Design is expected to be completed later this year or early next year. The wetland delineation is currently complete. We're just waiting on the survey to be complete so we can formally submit all the jurisdictional applications for that. And at that point, I think we'll feel pretty comfortable moving forward with a solidified concept that we can jump into design with and have some renderings for the public late in the fall of 2026. All right, and last we have Zebulon Community Park. So again, this one, being as large as it is and the potential for so many recreation amenities, this is obviously going to be a focus of the original master plan, and most of the desired community amenities would fit here given just the size of this park. So, in order to try to achieve, a lot of the things that were identified as key new amenities that people wanted, we did a master plan of this one in 2025 as well while we were doing the Gill Street Park. So our concept was built for this. This one's actually broken in multiple phases, but phase one lays the groundwork with a lot of infrastructure in the soccer fields, so that this park is kind of set up for future improvements as it moves forward and funding becomes available. So funding, again, for phase 1 design is underway. We've initiated this one in 26 as well. Again, same situation, the wetland delineation complete, the surveys nearing completion. And in this one, we'll also shoot to have our concept solidified based on the site assessment and have something available to show to the public fall 2026. So both of those parks are underway. We're looking forward to really diving into them. And in the same effort to expand athletic facilities that goes along with Zebulon Community Park. Again, we kind of have a side project going on with that as well to replace the baseball complexes and expand those in partnership with East Wake Academy. So we're calling that East Wake Academy School Park. The site-specific master plan has largely been completed. The concept has been shown to the public with a lot of positive feedback. We also have this graphic here showing how this one really integrates into the Gill Street site and it almost becomes one large park for this entire neighborhood. So we think the connectivity possibilities here are pretty cool as well. So we're excited to see this one move forward as well. And once all the coordination with the schools are complete, we can see how we can move this one forward as well. Sheila mentioned the progress on the recreation impact fee and how much has been collected to date, but it's also important to think about how much more can be achieved through this as well. So while she did mention the $7.2 million collected to date, the forecast is for $12 million by 2030. And so this can be used for expansion and land acquisition. So when you're thinking about how we can continue to expand Community Park, if we're providing additional amenities and increase capacity, that could be a possibility. So this is a very unique thing to be implemented, and we're hoping to see this continue to contribute to improvements for years to come. Other things that have been established and things that will need to continue to be pursued from the programming side. There's a financial aid program, so making programs more available to a wide range of people. There's been emphasis on safety and the action plans. As we mentioned, the special events have really expanded over the last few years, and especially things like Rock the Block. We're seeing tons of people downtown, and the safety of these events is very important, and the department's done a great job implementing that as well. Again, she mentioned updating department policy and standards. That's an ongoing thing. As the department continues to expand and have more assets to manage, they're going to continue to need to update their policies. We've seen a good increase in public art, particularly downtown through murals, and we're hoping to be able to implement that into the parks that we're designing as well. Things that need to be continued to pursued, once we get through the larger park improvements like ZCP and Little River and Gill Street, there needs to be, we'd like to see a shift towards neighborhood parks, which could involve some acquisition of land or improvements of existing parks to provide more capacity for those neighborhoods. A park bond is always something that's been somewhat discussed, but it may be something needed in the future to see some of the larger items, particularly at Zebulon Community Park, particularly if you want to consider things like a larger community center or aquatics. We talked about wayfinding and how we're incorporating that in, and we'll, as Sheila mentioned, that's something which, once there are town standards that are adopted, that we'll be sure to incorporate any park design elements to go with that as well. And we mentioned more public art in parks, and I think from my perspective, it's great to just see all this happen and to see all the possibilities that have come out of this plan. As I said from the start, seeing progress is not always guaranteed with these, so it's truly great to see what's been done here, and can't wait to see what comes next. So with that, I think that's all I have, unless you have anything else, but we can open it up to any other questions.
Thank you so much, Drew. Any feedback? I do. So I want to, talk to the board about the nonprofit applying for a nonprofit for the Parks and Rec or for just the town. It just so happened today I was at an economic development conference, and I met one of the board directors for Oak City Cares, which is like Raleigh's nonprofit. And I think that having that nonprofit, especially thinking about some particular projects, could really be beneficial with like public-private partnerships for the community, and especially with parks and what we're facing right now with our parks, with one particular park. I think that, you know, because as you guys know, I'm going after public-private partnerships to do everything we can to ensure that we have recreation in all of our communities. And so I don't know, Manager Crosby, where you are or with the nonprofit part, but I would really like to see us like kind of pursue that so that we could go after more dollars, and we can advocate for the dollars that we need within our community. And what better way to do that than with the, you know, if we can afford a tax write-off to help our community. What do you guys think?
Are you talking about the town creating another nonprofit, or for us to find a nonprofit to partner with? I think I would rather try and find a nonprofit to partner with rather than us working that other option.
I was thinking that we would have our own, because we talked about this before, correct? Sheila, I'm sorry, can you, or Manager Crosby, I don't know. Like,
No, I mean, Sheila can answer from the park perspective. I think as we have if this is something that the board wants to explore, and I think I've asked you about this, is it park specific or is it something a little bit broader to allow for more flexibility? So I think that's something we need to explore or have a conversation about. I would need some direction.
I like the nonprofit idea. I think, you know, Commissioner Baxter's, I can see where partnering could alleviate a lot of risk or liability, or, you know, the interpretation that, you know, certain groups are donating money for whatever, right? But then also having full control of the nonprofit allows us, like she said, to be more flexible. So it might not just be Parks and Rec specific when one nonprofit may only be for that. It could be for, you know, resource center funds or something like that, right? That other projects that I know are coming down the pipe. So I think for me, to be completely transparent, nonprofits are just a little bit out of my range. So I would tell you to bring a plan, a pros and cons and a plan. And I think from what I know in certain organizations in town that are nonprofits, having control of it is better than partnering, but I can see where, you know, that position could be good as well. But I would be open to it, sure.
yeah.
And I don't disagree with having it within our control so that we can really kind of direct the priorities and pursue funding opportunities. But my other concern right now is, who are we going to get from staff? Do we have the staff capacity to be able to create that nonprofit and have it functioning well? And we might, and you might feel like we've got that capacity, and if we do, then, you know, I absolutely think that it's a wonderful idea to be able to have some kind of arm that we could use kind of as a monetary bridge.
Yeah, and that is, I'm very passionate about this part. So I really, where we are right now, especially with parks, I think it is extremely important for us to go after private support.
I do not disagree.
You know what I mean? Like,
One bit. We have to, because
Yeah.
otherwise we're not going to get the things done on plans that we've already committed to and funds that we've already spent. And, you know, like, I want to see Gill Street happen. I need to see Gill Street happen for our residents. And right now, we're going to have to pursue some, you know, pretty alternative, unique, you know, funding opportunities in order to do that. So, yeah, I don't disagree. As long as we've got the staff capacity, then I think that we should move forward with that idea. I like it.
Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, I agree. I think multi-purpose type of a nonprofit, shall we, like George is saying, Commissioner Joe, I think it's a great conversation.
Okay. Does that, Manager?
So I would work with the town attorney and the staff to figure out,
See what that
you know,
looks
what
like.
those priorities are and how that would function. If you could give me by the time you all come back in August?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and just know that, like, you know, for I'll speak for myself. Whenever I go outside of this community, and even in this community, I'm advocating, you know, and we all are. We're advocating for more resources, for more funds, and not just to legislators or, you know, we're talking to private, we're talking to business owners, GSK. You know, so, you know, like, bring them to the table. So we really want, I believe that this tool will open up the door for us to walk into some different spaces and make some asks that we haven't in the past or currently been able to ask. So if that gives you, manager, if that gives you good direction. Okay. Thank you, sorry. We talked about this before and like, we just never really closed it. So I just kind of wanted to emphasize the importance it is for me.
May I share an update?
Oh, yeah.
In addition to starting our own nonprofit, I think that you'll still, even going down that road, you'll still want to work with other nonprofits. An example of that would be like land conservancies or the Triangle Trails Initiative. And so there will absolutely be organizations that we can engage to continue to further these efforts. And there is a land conservancy, I actually got an email today about it, an opportunity for us to meet to talk about ways that they can help us implement some new park initiatives and greenway initiatives and things like that. So we'll definitely keep you in the loop because I don't think going down this route of trying to form our own nonprofit, you know, takes away from those opportunities to partner with these other entities. I think it only strengthens it at the end of the day. So thank you.
Mr. Clerk, could you manage to get us scheduled maybe a meeting with the directors or CEO of Oak City Cares, just so we can ask some questions? Katie, you think that, like, just so we can ask some questions to Oak City Cares, they're Raleigh's nonprofit arm, City of Raleigh's nonprofit arm.
Okay.
Just so we can ask some questions, kind of see what they do. You got that already? Sorry, I didn't mean to I just wanted to, no?
Just if you're going to do that, they also have the Dix Parks Conservancy.
They do.
That I would suggest, that's an opportunity to see how a municipality, while they're much larger, they do have the Oak City Cares, but they also have a park. And then you can just get that information to see how they work separately, but you can also look to see how they could work together for the town while we make that decision on which way we want to go.
Absolutely. Thank you. So if you guys can try to schedule that and ensuring that we're kind of consensus. We want it to be broader than just parks. We want to make sure that this is something that we can utilize across the organization should we decide to go in that direction.
I think we also have a citizen, Marvin Howell, right? Who's, I think he worked in Raleigh's
Parks and Rec in Raleigh.
for like
Pull
20
apart.
years. So I think we can probably, I'm thinking about maybe calling him and asking him, but he might be a good resource too. I think he's retired now, but yeah.
The other thing I might add is that as we're exploring this, we're also in the midst of a strategic planning process and just making sure that that shows up in there as a priority for the board if it is a priority for the board.
I think anything right now, Manager Crosby, that we can, any kind of tool or any kind of resource we can bring in that can help us increase resources and opportunity, I think it would speak to, you know what I mean, the strategic plan or how we plan to move forward, because we just want to expand services and resources so that our community continues to thrive, whatever that looks like. All right. Thank you guys so much. Any other questions from the board? Feedback?
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah, that was
Thank you
great.
so much.
Thank you so much. All right. And now we,
Great job too.
oh yeah, sorry, Matt. Great job. With our next section being a closed session, do we have a Motion, we have a motion, we have a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11, attorney-client privilege 143-318.11, real estate acquisition for the purpose of parks. Is there a motion to go in closed session?
I make a motion to go into closed session.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. We're closed session. Thank you.